Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology Podcast, sponsored by Clear Company. Now, I've talked a lot about recruitment marketing and how it has evolved over the past decade to follow the model of traditional digital marketing. And we're learning and following that model and how we can apply those strategies. There's a lot of synergy and parallel application between those two things. Our guest today wrote a book on this topic. His name is Victor Assad, and Victor is the CEO of Strategic Human Resources Consulting. He's the managing partner of Innovation One and author of Hack Recruiting. Hack Recruiting has the best empirical research method, process, and digitization. Victor is a global human resource leader who works with talent management, leadership development, acceleration for change, organizational and cultural development, and innovation and other strategic initiatives. With over 25 years of experience, Victor has led human resource organizations in fast growth, high technology, global businesses for companies like Honeywell and Medtronic, which is then the medical device and aerospace industries, software, specialty, semiconductors, and electronic industries. He has quite the resume and a lot of really great resources. I'm excited for you to meet him and learn more about Hack Recruiting. Victor, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Well, Jessica, thank you very much. It's great to be here. You've done some awesome work over the past several years, and so I'm honored to be on your program.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about your background and talk to us about how your experience led you to becoming a speaker and advocate on recruiting talent and building HR capabilities topics.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The first thing I would tell everybody, and I do tell everybody, is I've had a wonderful career in human resources working globally. You know, as I like to say, from Milano to Mumbai. And I am just delighted to work on issues on talent strategy, recruiting, developing high potential people, how to get organizations aligned to a purpose and to really perform well. And I've noticed throughout the years, particularly with recruiting, but with other HR processes, that those processes, the processes that we have in HR, aren't always treated as seriously as a process, say, as manufacturing or a sales process or what marketing has or R&D. And really, when you have a high volume process in HR, and recruiting is often one of those, performance management would be another. We need to work with our business leaders to help them understand we need to manage these processes just as effectively as those other processes that I've mentioned. Have everyone in the process trained for it, have measures and predictive measures. And when we do that, we drive profitable growth for these companies. Now, we are in the best age to be in HR. And the reason I say that is that the digital technologies that have been available to marketing are now available to us. I'm talking about machine learning, chatbots, artificial intelligence, blockchain. And just like marketing, we can use these tools to really promote an employer brand and attract people to our brands. It's a very exciting time.
Where did the idea for your book, which is called Hack Recruiting, come from? And kind of talk about a little bit about the book and maybe what you enjoyed most in working on this book.
Sure. So I was actually writing a different book, Jessica, which I'm going back now to finish. It was about culture and purpose, and the talent strategies and people operations you need to have these great innovative cultures. And when I got to the recruiting chapter, I thought, my goodness, there is so much change going on here. And I thought I was up on the technology. And so I decided, this is the book that needed to come out first because of all the change. What I enjoyed most about it is connecting with the HR technologists and, the first movers in HR that were using these new technologies, and learning what they can do for us. And it's just extraordinary. That was some of the funnest learning that I had and some of the most fun conversations I had in writing the book.
When you talk about transformation in the recruiting space, because you mentioned a lot about recruiting and talent acquisition transformation in the book, what are you specifically talking about?
Well, I often break them down into 3 or 4 categories. The first one is that the transformation to really understanding all the great empirical evidence that's been around since Thorndike, over 100 years ago, about controlling human bias to really select people and knowing what competencies you want in your hires so that you hire more people like your best people. I'm always a little bit stunned when CEOs or HR people don't understand that. And so that's one big transformation. And that's just really learning what our profession's already learned. The second thing is what I mentioned already about process. Recruiting, high volume processes in HR, we need to run them just as seriously as we might lean out a manufacturing process. And when we do that, we'll have great processes. And when everyone knows how to interview to select the best people, not to use, first impressions or other human bias, we can do great things for organizations to build their capability. And particularly when you do those things and have a very adaptive culture, then when you bring in digital technology, you're hitting a grand slam. And because that technology automates paperwork, it automates all the administrative stuff, and it speeds up your ability to find, build relationships with, and recruit people. It's extraordinary. When you begin to do this, HR can use statistics like net promoter scores for job candidates that marketing's been using and using them for job candidates. Think about how HR can build brand and build alliance to the customer brand because of how well they treat job candidates in the recruiting process. That's a game changer. And particularly if companies are in retail or restaurants or a hotel chain, people who apply to your jobs have an opportunity to be your customer. And when you treat them well as a job candidate, they're going to think highly of you, recommend you to others to apply for your jobs, as well as use your products and services. And so this is all a game changer, very transformational. But a lot of people, fear these technologies. Recruiters fear they're going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. That's not going to happen. Recruiters are going to benefit from artificial intelligence, finding candidates quicker, and it gives them more time to do that human interface, which is never going to go away, and that is to build relationships with job candidates, particularly now, where we're on 18 months or whatever it is of having more open jobs than unemployed people in the United States. We have a labor shortage, so we have to learn to recruit passive candidates to move quickly as we do it.
I love as we're talking about transformation and I'm listening to you talk and you kind of walk us through a couple different areas. You talk about processes, but the last thing that you mention of kind of that three pieces is the technology. And I think it's great that you separated between the two, because I think a lot of times people think that technology is going to fix everything. But you're saying that processes need to be in place before we bring in the technology. And I think that is such an important part of what I'm seeing a lot of companies do incorrectly or in the wrong order.
Well, I'm right behind you with that, Jessica. You are right on. And it's vitally important that all of our colleagues out there take ownership for having excellent processes. And not only does that help the technology, but the executives, the managers, they appreciate that. When things run smoothly, they love that, and so do the job candidates. And yeah, technology alone, you're so right, is not a silver bullet.
So let's talk about tech, because you and I were just at HR Tech, and there's a lot of different pieces of technology for all areas of human resources, but specifically in relation to your book, in the recruiting side of things. How do recruiting leaders stay on top of all these changes? And do you have any best practices for them in terms of finding the right tech and sort of navigating through this really busy, I don't know, I feel like there's a million different recruiting technologies, and sometimes they all say the same thing.
Well, they do. And first off, HR leaders, need to recognize that in addition to staying up on compliance issues, right, being a technologist is, part of the job description these days, as much so as it is in a marketing leader, an IT leader, an R&D leader. And particularly, I'm talking about digital technology to improve processes, right? To help with collaboration at companies like Slack and other technologies like that. So in addition to HR people having a subscription to SHRM or whoever they, HR.com, wherever they choose to work with on compliance, it's following, TechCrunch. You have a field book, as I recall, Jessica, on HR technology, staying up on sources like that, the reporting that you do. There's others that do that. And so I tell HR leaders, whether you're in small companies or big companies, that's part of the job. You need to stay on top of the technology that impacts you and help discern what works and what doesn't work. In the book, I talk about not just the technologies that work, but there's several out there that don't work, and how do you help discern the difference? And there's tools out there to help HR leaders do that.
Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast, sponsored by Clear Company. Today, we're talking about hacking recruiting, leveling up your recruitment game with author Victor Assad.
Podcast support provided by Clear Company. Clear Company is a complete talent management platform used by human resources professionals to help them hire, retain, and engage A players with ease. Visit clearcompany.com to sign up for a free personalized demo.
I was talking with somebody last night. I was at Hacking HR here in Austin, and we were just kind of talking about the landscape. And in my experience, there are so many new technologies out there that are coming in. A lot of it's because of all the investment money that's coming into our space and the economy. But oftentimes the startups or the founders or just different players, they haven't ever actually worked in recruiting, and they don't know the history of the business. What advice do you have maybe for recruiters? Because they really are subject matter experts in the space. They're just not technologists, so to speak, but they know the history and they've seen things kind of come and go.
Well, great question. And, let me tell you a story. So in writing the book, word got out about it. So I'd have different technologists call me, and several would call and they say, my recruiting platform assesses talent, and I can tell you who's the best people to hire for a position. And I said, oh, really? Has it been validated? And they said, what's that? So,
Nice.
There's, those people didn't make the book. So let's start with great practices and understanding how we select people without bias, right? And going to validated assessments. And there's a long history of great validated assessments, and they're vigilant to see that they don't cause unconscious bias of some sort in the assessment. And in the book, I talk through with the reader how you determine if you're using an assessment that's been developed for leaders or whatever over time. I'll call it a historical assessment, or something new from data science from an HR tech firm. And how you help determine whether that assessment is bias-free or not bias-free. But you have to go through these steps, because if you don't, and you end up not hiring people who are otherwise qualified except for their gender or their race or whatever, you got the risk of a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. So part of that is the profession standing up to and holding HR technologists to good standards. And I would tell you that's everybody in HR's job, because, we don't want to be hiring people who aren't going to do well on the job, and we don't want to exclude people because of their gender, an accent, what they look like, a disability, and so forth.
One of the things that you were mentioning as earlier was artificial intelligence. And I am fascinated by AI and have kind of made it my, personal mission to put a lot of resources. And we recently launched a study on artificial intelligence. I think it's interesting that your point of view is that AI is not going to take over recruiters' jobs. It's going to help them, but it isn't going to do and replace the recruiting function. What do you say to those people who say the opposite of what you're talking about now? Or saying like recruiting is going away, it's going to be fully automated. Why do you feel so strongly that it's not going to be fully automated?
Well, let me first say it's a great study that you've released, and I encourage everyone to read it about AI, and it'll help overcome people's fears about it. I like to tell the story of young Gen Z and millennials, right? And people that I find who have been interviewed by a human being or by a pre-recorded video or quite literally a robot interviewing them. And I asked them, how did you feel about that? And they said, if it's just asking questions like, how long have I been in the industry? When would I be available to start? Pretty straightforward questions. I don't have a problem with it. But when it starts getting into deeper questions, or if I know that computer is making judgments about me based on how often I move my hands around, or if my eyes are looking up or looking down, then I don't like that. I don't want to be a part of that. So artificial intelligence will help us, and I know because I've used it, find people faster, help us sort through that huge candidate pool to find out who are the best ones. But it turns over to a human interface. And that's what, from Gen Z to baby boomers, that's what they want. So they're welcome, they're open to a text message. They're open to an initial screen that might be a pre-recorded video. But they don't like it when a robot, if you will, is making judgments about them based on how they talk. They want a human interface, and I would tell you the sooner the better. And that's why we'll always need recruiters. People want to relate to a company because a company's culture is shaped by the leaders and the people in the culture, and that recruiter is the first ambassador of that culture. And the good thing for recruiters is, they don't need to be, spending weeks looking for candidates in some of the most popular ways these days. Artificial intelligence can do that for them more effectively. And that allows them to spend more time developing a talent pool, developing relationships with people in that talent pool, assessing that talent, and, bringing them into the organization.
Have you seen the study on 64% of people trust a robot more than their manager from Oracle?
Tell me more about that.
So it's, again, this is marketing 101. I feel like people throw this kind of stuff out because it's interesting, and we're going to talk about it on the podcast, but it doesn't really talk about the bigger problem, or the potential solution. So this study says that people trust a robot more than their manager, and they would rather use artificial intelligence or have a robot, AI, managing them or helping to give them feedback on how have done their work.
Yeah, that's interesting. My view is that, I need to learn more about that study, but it seems to fly in the face of other studies that have been out there.
I agree. I kind of feel like it's marketing stuff. And while I might want a robot to help me or AI simplify my life, I don't want them telling me what to do and reminding me or coaching me, because I'm a person, not a robot. And there's a lot of human factors that come into maybe my performance, or just things that are happening within your employees' lives that I don't think a robot can determine whether or not you're satisfactorily performing or not.
I agree. I mean, I know that there's some performance management softwares that will read your emails as a manager and tell you if you're a little harsher to one employee rather than another. But, and I think that's okay to use. But, I also do research on innovation and cultures of innovation. I'm currently doing a study with the Conference Board. And that research, our research, the research from several other consulting organizations and academics, show that it's collaborative, adaptive cultures that are the most innovative and have the best financial results. And, it's all about giving people permission to collaborate with each other, come up with ideas, build upon those ideas, and then management quickly deciding which ones to move forward on. Now, they need AI to probably help them with that, but it gets back to that human interface. I don't think we're gonna see that go away.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the most important innovation in recruiting that we should be paying attention to right now?
Well, that's a great question because there are so many, but I'm going to default to AI, which you have a passion for because it's so applicable for improving things. So I've worked with chatbot companies, right? And so you can set up a chatbot, where the recruiter writes it and sort of sets up a template, and it's used in a certain set of jobs. And then you can have a chatbot that's powered by AI. And so that AI looks for patterns and can even look at the person's qualifications. And if, let's say that they have been denied for the first job that they applied for, that chatbot can come back and say, we think you might be qualified for job B or job C, and do it quicker than the human, right? And so whether you're using AI to find candidates, to match candidates, or to assist with a chatbot, or using AI to truly look for the relationships of great competencies with great workers, I think that's golden. The prediction I'm going to make to you is that within 5 years, what we currently understand in HR and industrial organizational psychology about the big five, things like conscientiousness, we're going to have that rewritten based on the power of artificial intelligence and using these tools, not just in one company, but out there, to find out what really drives an excellent medical device sales rep, leadership, great software engineers, and what competencies, knowledge, skills, and abilities to look for. And I think, the background of all this and all these examples I've mentioned is AI. Now, we have to be vigilant to make sure that biases don't creep into artificial intelligence. Amazon kind of learned that lesson through the school of hard knocks. But I think, for these reasons, I would tell you AI is what I think is most important.
So start thinking about AI if you haven't already, and sit down and demo some products, maybe take a class, read Victor's book, read our study. There's a lot of really good information out there. I'm glad that we're on the same page. I'm not surprised that we're on the same page, but it is going to fundamentally change our recruiting activities, and we'll learn so much more about what is effective and ineffective.
Well, you're so right. And there are a lot of great resources out there. You've mentioned a few, and I write in the technology chapter of Hack Recruiting. By the time you read this, the world will have changed a little bit. The rate of change is so fast. And that's why, I encourage all HR leaders, hey, read TechCrunch, set it up to give you alerts so you know what's going on in HR technology, just as much as what you do for compliance.
I like that they should be going to TechCrunch, and I agree, because they need to be up to date on HR technology outside of publications like mine or conferences or different things, and kind of get that tech point of view, because that's what the other founders, startups, engineers, they're all reading too.
Yeah, they are.
So let's say that somebody's in the market for a new technology, and we'll just kind of keep it maybe basic, and we'll just start with an ATS. I hope they have an ATS already, but let's say that they're looking at upgrading their technology or considering making a change. Where should they begin?
Well, they should begin by looking at TechCrunch, and there's other websites out there that rate, Sherm would be one of them, technologies. And they need to, secondly, use the 80-20 rule. So whatever technology they choose, they want to make sure that it works 80% out of the box, if you will, for what they want. And I would tell them to develop a very detailed list of questions on that. Now, with an applicant tracking system, I would start with the user experience. So you want to enable a job candidate to apply for your jobs within 5 minutes, and they are done. Some people, not some, too many people today spend over an hour doing, answering questions on an applicant tracking system, uploading their resume, seeing their resume's beautiful formatting be ruined by the applicant tracking system. And then the HR people can't find the talent they need except for that one job posting. So a lot of legacy applicant tracking systems are hopelessly out of date. And so look for ones that, with that end user experience in mind and have the technology to do that, have chat bot capability to reach out to your job applicants and keep them up to date as you go from thank you for submitting to we want to schedule an interview with you to I'm sorry you're not the best fit that we found for this job. Please consider these other jobs. And you want something that will track metrics for you about your recruiting process, including which managers respond within a day to when they get alerts. Often it's not HR, it's the managers that hold up recruiting. These type of process metrics. And, you want an ATS that also has an AI platform built into it so it can help screen candidates, not just the external ones, but the ones you already have in there. Again, it's low unemployment. It's great to reach out to your second or third choice candidates on previous openings when you have a new one. And, that also interfaces well with your payroll system. So you don't have to re-enter all the personal data and maybe can start that onboarding process for you. So, I'm with you. People ought to have a great applicant tracking systems. I was working with a client recently that had an in-house developed ATS. And, frankly, it was so poor the recruiters were keeping their own Excel spreadsheets. And, that's not what we want. So you want technology that works, that's simple. But back to what I said earlier, when you have your recruiting processes in order and you know what you want, then that applicant tracking system will work even better.
I feel like as you're talking, I'm shaking my head and I'm thinking about the times when back in the day when things weren't integrated, and I'm sure there's still many people that feel this pain where I bring in a hire and then I have to fill out a form and send it to my admin so she can push it through their HRIS. So those things are still very real for a lot of different people, or living within spreadsheets instead of working within their applicant tracking system. So all important things for them to consider when they're making their purchases, because you don't want to go backwards, you want to move forwards.
You do, and I love working with companies to show how there's a financial return on investment for that. When we look at hiring faster, hiring better job candidates, reducing turnover.
I love it. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. Where can people go to learn more about you and maybe connect with you after this interview?
Sure, they can go to my website, victorhrconsultant.com, and they'll learn more about hacked recruiting there. They can sign up for my weekly blogs. I'm also on social media with those blogs. And of course, buying the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble online, or through my publisher, Archway.
I will also say that Victor has a really good newsletter, and he's sharing some really insightful pieces of content. So sign up for that. We're going to be including that more in our list of resources on our new newsletter over on Workology, which is we have an HR newsletter, and now we're focused on the recruitment newsletter. So connect with Victor and his newsletter. Lots of good content and resources.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Oh, anytime.
In our current talent marketplace, innovation is more important than ever. While we have a tendency to fall into the shiny object syndrome, I know I do, with all of the cool tech tools available today, understanding where we can get started and where we can go to reduce just that overwhelming feeling in the most productive way when it comes to technology adoption, but also process adoption is so important. I appreciate Victor's knowledge, his insights, and sharing that with us today. A link to his website will be available in the transcript of this podcast, along with a link to his book and then the show notes. So you can get all the things that you need to get started hacking your recruiting processes and really driving transformational change for recruitment for the rest of the year and beyond. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast sponsored by Clear Company. This is Jessica Miller Merrill. This podcast is all about the disruptive workplace, and we're challenging the status quo. So next time, visit all our podcasts, and you can connect with workology.com to learn more about our previous Workology podcast episodes and guests.